record of the evening. It sometimes helps them apply for grants and so on. And so you've just heard the recording come on. Now, one more thing I'd like to say is all the talent you're going to hear today reads at this reading series at no charge. And so we ask, in the fairness of exchange and in the support of the arts and good literature, that you support these writers and the gifts that they are sharing with us over the course of the evening without payment, by buying their works or making a donation to one of their charities, or going to their Indiegogo Patreon accounts, give them a 5-star rating on Goodreads, and follow them on social media and like every damn thing they say. Even for us, Barrett and Wells, it helps for us if you, because where the company I founded is the host of the evening, it helps us too. We're a small company. It helps us when you like us on Facebook or review us on Google, because it's not easy to survive as a small business, and every positive review helps little. So now I'm going to just talk briefly about the reading series and why we have it. So first of all, the series was launched by Mayank Bhatt, who's attending tonight. Mayank is an author. He wrote the novel Belief. He's a fellow Moenzi author, as it happens, like me. And we began the series in 2017, Canada's 150th anniversary. And we thought what we wanted to do, we wanted to create equity in Canadian literary circles by privileging or centering writers who identify as Black, Indigenous, or people of color, and who don't typically experience privilege in Canada. And at the same time, we wanted to invite all writers who celebrate Canada's multi-Indigenous heritage and who have a talent to share. And we welcome them all. In this era of heightened awareness of brutality and widespread injustice experienced by those who are Black and Indigenous especially, and by other people of color too, I'd like to point out that readings like this that focus on the importance of nature, that promotes the voices least heard and experiences we are least familiar with, is especially important because it makes familiar and makes available to our imaginations experiences that are typically outside of the standard. It's a good point for me to give a shout out to fellow organizers who are doing similar work. Barzan, who is going to be doing an open mic tonight. I know Nigel Thomas in Montreal has his reading series. Ellen Chang Richardson had hers Riverbed series yesterday in Ottawa. Charles Smith, who does CPAMA, promotes pluralism in the arts. Mia Center for the Arts, which is Canada's first Black Arts Center, and one of our clients. So they're just outstanding, supporters of the same cause, and I just wanted to acknowledge them. I also want to acknowledge that where I am coming from is dish with one spoon territory. It is the site of a covenant between the Indigenous peoples, between themselves, before and after that, with all those who came to the land and are invited in to share and care for the land in a spirit of friendship and amity and equal concern for the land that gives so much to us. I'm particularly located, and each one of our writers is located differently. I'm located in District 1 Spoon territory, in Treaty 13 in Williams Treaty's lands, which are the traditional territory of the Mississaugas, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. And it's the land is where I am in Toronto has seen human activity for 15,000 years. And we recognize that we have a history of broken and bad faith treaties, and that there is an urgent need for reconciliation. And I urge everyone who attends these readings to look up the Truth and Reconciliation recommendations, the the call to action. There are 94 calls to action, and choose calls that you can embrace and participate in, so that reconciliation, flows. We are grateful to be able to host the Tartan Turban series from these lands. And it's now time for me to introduce Veena. Let me go back to full screen here. Veena Gokhale is an immigrant shapeshifter. Veena is going to be curated this evening on this incredible lineup for us. She describes herself as an immigrant shapeshifter. She began her career in Bombay as a journalist. We have that as our hometown in common. I'm from Bombay too, now called Mumbai. And this tough, tantalizing city, and it is a tough and tantalizing city, inspired Bombay Wali and other stories. I was actually introduced to Veena by Mayank, Mayank, protests whenever I say this, was so instrumental in helping me get these writers, to meet these writers and to get the series started. And thanks to Mayank, I actually got to meet Veena. Veena came to Canada on a journalism fellowship, returned to do a master's, worked for non-profits after immigrating. Her novel, Land for Fatima, Guernica, which was published in Guernica, was inspired by a 2-year stint in Tanzania. Something I find in these readings, I find so much in common with so many of the writers. My mother was born in Kenya and my parents were married in Tanzania. Veena was published in anthologies and literary magazines, has read widely from her work, has received writing grants of every kind, does a lot of freelance journalism. She's about to publish, and I have got a sneak peek at this spectacular book, I must say, The Artichoke Censure Stories, in December 2021. She is also working on Annapurna's Bounty, in which she is recasting food-related legends into contemporary fiction. Veena gives, I'm dying to go to one of these, Indian vegetarian cooking classes online. I'm not a vegetarian, but this sounds very interesting. She lives in Montreal. You can follow her on Facebook, look up Veena Stories. And Veena, thank you for organizing this absolutely spectacular evening. And it's over to you the rest of the evening to run the show and to shape it in your image. Thank you.
Thank
Please
you,
do
Gavin.
unmute yourself and join us. Yeah.
Excellent. Now, I just have a quick question. Will there usually be a square which remains like blank, or no?
Nope.
No?
You should. No, now we just see you. I've stopped sharing my screen.
Excellent. Okay. So it'll be whoever's reading. So welcome, everyone. I am so thrilled that you all came, because Zoom fatigue has set in for a lot of us.
Hey.
But still, you did make it, and I hope you stay. It might seem a bit long in terms of time, but it will go by very fast, because we have these amazing readers, authors. And when I was putting this together, I had two things in mind. One is, of course, a kind of diverse mix of people and genres. So I have Bonita Lawrence, who is my friend, actually, full disclosure here. And she's written this amazing book, which she's the first reader, so I won't go into that so much. I'll be reading her bio as well. And she is half Mi'kmaq and half of English ancestry. Then Amatoritsero, all these folks I've known in different ways, and you will, again, when I read the bios, see those connections. So we have 4 readers, a break, 10-minute break, and then 4 others. And the genres are novel, of course, the venerable novel. We have short story, which is going to be me, poetry, of course, and as well as nonfiction. And both the authors who represent nonfiction have written about something pertaining to their own lives. So there's a kind of a literary flavor and this kind of emotive aspect, I guess, to it. The other thing is that we do encourage you to stay after, maybe take a break again and come back, because Gavin hasn't mentioned this, but there's an after event party usually, and Gavin is a great believer in everyone having a drink in hand, like even if you get one now, you'd be quite pleased, actually, because I also am a Bombay girl, a party girl. So that was another thing that attracted me to this series. All the right things are here, diversity, fun, literature, it's all there. So the other thing the last thing I wanted to say is all these folks are not just writing incredible works, but they are also doing other kinds of things. So 3 of them, Bonita, Amatoritsero, and Carolyn, are academics. So they're teachers. So that's a lot of work. Andreas actually works at an independent bookstore in Montreal called Paragraph. Nilambri works for a magazine, a literary magazine. She's one of the founder of that magazine, one of the founder members. And Banu, you'll hear about also her contributions. So everyone, Gavin, of course, runs the series with Mayank. So everyone is doing a lot of other things. And I thought, maybe I should redeem myself a little bit and at least, curate the series, because I'm sort of the little bit lazy person here in terms of my community contribution to the yachts. And the people who are attending also, by the way, are very active in their communities. So without further ado, I will introduce Bonita Lawrence, our first reader. Dr. Bonita Lawrence is a professor in the Humanities Department at York University, where she is a founding member of the Indigenous Studies program, where she also teaches. Dr. Lawrence has co-authored 2 academic books, Fractured Homeland, Federal Recognition and Algonquin Identity in Ontario, and Real Indians and Others, Mixed Race Urban Native People and Indigenous Nationhood. As well, she has co-authored, along with Kim Anderson, a collection of essays entitled Strong Women Stories, Native Vision and Community Survival. And she's also written, of course, a number of academic articles. Her first novel, which she's going to read from, is called Nadindla Ove Inaklan, Micmac Sojourns in England. And she will read the Micmac title much better than I have read it, I think. It's a historical novel spanning 5 centuries in Micmac history and its connections to England, Mi'kmaq history and its connections to England, told in a series of vignettes. So Bonita, please wow us with a reading from your novel. Thank you.
We can't hear you.
I think she hasn't come on yet.
My apologies. We were asked to mute and I forgot. Okay, so this is my book, Nindiloe, England, Mi'kmaq Sojourns in England. And I'm going to read from the chapter called After the Treaties. Hunger has become a way of life. The gaping emptiness inside, the barren ground outside, as all possible edibles are stripped from the land without thought to leave a few plants to regenerate. The desperate willingness to do anything for anybody who offers food. The weakness that makes us such easy prey for the wasting disease of consumption and terrible whooping cough where we struggle with our last strength to catch our breath. But then there are so many other new diseases that rage through our communities. We're all numb, the survivors. When my parents were young, they were part of the tiny village of Elsitcook. Both my grandparents hunted together. My grandmother had become a good hunter while my grandfather was at war. There was still moose meat and deer meat and their skins to keep them warm. Both their mothers, who were good friends, lived with them and did most of the sewing. These days, we beg for food and blankets. They're talking about finally providing us with access to land so that we can farm. How can we start farming without food to make us strong enough to work? The men we have left in our communities, so many have been taken by the British for showing the least resistance. They try to hunt, but the woods around here are being replaced by settlers' fields, and most of the animals are gone. I'm only in my late teens, yet in many ways I feel like an old woman. Since the food got very scarce, I've stopped menstruating. Women need food to be fertile. I believe that's why we're birthing so few children. Getting to this place of desperation took a long time. My mother used to tell us stories from her mother about the long war we fought against the British. How, after the first peace treaty, our Smaknizak, or warriors, did not submit peacefully, but how brutally they were punished whenever they rebelled. How many of our men were captured and sold into slavery. So when Britain declared war against Spain in 1744, our men rose up against the British again. Governor Shirley of Massachusetts then set a bounty of 100 pounds for every male Indian killed and 50 pounds for every woman and child killed. I want to interrupt for a second to say that the average annual income for a man in Massachusetts at the time was about 20 pounds a year. And I think we don't know how many New England fortunes have come from bounty hunting. So after this bounty was set, it was not only rape from the British soldiers and some of the settlers that we feared. Gorham's Rangers, the bloodthirstiest of men, hounds for hire, were brought into Nova Scotia from Massachusetts to collect bounty for our scalps. It was terrifying in the villages, my mother told me. She would tell of the days when the women had lookouts around all of our villages. At the first sign of a white man, they would run into the woods and hide under the cover of thorn thickets, or the younger women who were stronger would take their babies up high into the trees. Children had already learned the art of silence from their mothers. They had made a game of it, that the child who could stay silent the longest would be rewarded. Babies were suckled to ensure that they did not cry and inadvertently betray their mother's presence. My grandfather, who survived years of warfare, vanished at that time, as did several of my uncles and cousins. Many friends and neighbors also vanished at that time. Our chiefs sued for peace in 1749, but the British were vengeful. Governor Cornwallis announced his own scalping proclamation, 10 pounds for every scalp, man, woman, or child. More of our family vanished without a trace at that time, and typhus carried off my grandmother soon afterwards. A year later, Cornwallis raised the bounty to 50 pounds per scalp. Those were truly times of terror, my mother told me, when whole families vanished as if they had never existed. Although he later repealed that proclamation, the hunting of Mi'kmaq people did not stop. 3 years later, every Acadian who did not swear an oath of fealty to the British and their churches were rounded up and dragged onto ships. Our people fought back to protect them. They had been our allies and friends for so long. As punishment for coming to their assistance, another proclamation was made, offering 25 pounds for every Mi'kmaq man's scalp and 25 pounds for every woman or child brought in alive. My parents' family were gone after that. My mother was convinced that they would not stop until we were all destroyed. I was still a young girl when the colonies to the south of us fought a war with the British. When the war ended, a huge new wave of settlers came in and we lost more and more land. Many of our people died from starvation. Without animal skins, we suffered terribly in the cold. Settlers took many of our men to work their farms in exchange for food, but by then my father was too weak for them to take interest in having him work. He starved to death just before the measles epidemic that took my mother, my baby brother, and my little sister. There was nobody left of my family but myself and one sister. Over and over I see how extraneous we are to this order they're imposing, like the animals, like the trees, were to be cut down, destroyed. I try not to think, try not to access my heart's knowledge. That knowledge could destroy me, as my family was destroyed. Each day, as the sun rises, I'm determined to survive. Many of the younger women were leaving Ulsukuk by then, to be closer to the ships where sailors came in. My sister and I went with them after our parents died. We could think of nowhere else to go. We walked and walked, faint with hunger, our feet leaving bloody footprints, which soon were washed away in the fall rain. The women who had gone before us had set up a wigwam in the woods nearby, and we all crowded into it. My sister and I could not rent ourselves to the sailors. The other women who went with the sailors had a dress to wear, no matter how rough. They were thin, as we all were, but they weren't skeletal like we were. It may be that our community was the hardest hit, or maybe it was just our bad luck to lose our entire family. The fact is, my sister and I were so bony and ragged that the other women did not expect us to contribute. And yet, through their kindness, they shared their food with us. And they let my sister and I stay with them in these wigwams filled with survivors from different communities, all trading sex for food and blankets. Soon, however, most of them had a new disease. One woman got sick very fast. She was blind before she died. Another one died fast too, but she was raving insane, us holding her down in her madness. Despair stared us in the face, struggling to restrain a dying woman when we were all that was left. By midwinter, with enough food, the women's menses began to come back. But as the dreadful months of winter slowly gave way to spring, none of them were getting pregnant. The hope that spring usually brings did not happen. We all believe that the disease makes them sterile. My sister Magalit and I knew we could not stay there taking food that others were working for. Margalit had heard about a settlement called Digby, where black men had settled. With some of the food the woman had given us, we set out in the late spring to walk there. Hunger drove us every step. Begging was our only hope. The black people came here at the same time that all the white people came in after the war with the British. They were part of an all-black company called the Black Pioneers. We came to beg for scraps, hoping they would lack the cruelty of white men. Instead, seeing our desperate hunger, they began simply inviting us to share their food. I think maybe they're lonely for women, perhaps because there are more men than women there. Or perhaps, from the slavery they endured, they recognize starvation when they see it. Margalit, 2 years younger than me, is a flirty young thing. The two of us make a fine pair, though, both of us wrapped in old blankets with only rags underneath. Our bony hips jut from the blankets as we wrap them tight in a vain attempt to keep warm. I'm glad that I cut off my hair when I lost my mother. A lot of it had fallen out lately. At least now with it short, I may keep whatever hair I have left. What I hate is that my teeth are becoming loose. I've lost a few already. And my breath is becoming so foul. I think it means my body is consuming itself because there's nothing else for it to eat. Margalit visits with William Black, whose little cabin is nearby, but I enjoy spending time with John Waddell, a man in his early 30s with beautiful dark brown skin. He's a fine man who teases me incessantly, even as he feeds me chicken stew and dumplings, just a little at a time, knowing by the state of me that I haven't had good food in a long, long time. "Girl, you ain't nothing but a bone. Look at you," he says, teasingly. I toss my short hair. I've eaten dinner with him for the past 3 days, and I have to keep the conversation light to avoid weeping with gratitude. "I may be skinny, but these are fine bones." He laughs at that. "Be polite. Take off your blanket when you sit down, girl." He knows I have almost nothing on underneath. I tighten the blanket instead. "You're dying to see these bones, aren't you?" So our teasing goes, but underneath we're watching each other. He always invites me back for the next meal, casually, as if it wasn't keeping me alive. I eat ravenously now that I'm more accustomed to food. He cooks for 3 just to provide for the 2 of us. I have no idea how much he can afford to feed me, and I can't care at this point. I don't know what I will do when he loses interest in me. One day, a few weeks after I met him, he surprised me by giving me a small cloth parcel. When I opened it, to my shock, I saw a deep blue dress, the color of the sky just before dusk settles in. I cried then, tears that I had forgotten I knew how to shed. "How did you get this?" I asked. "One of the men here, his wife who came up here with us, was a seamstress. I got the material in town and she made it up for me. I could only guess your size," he told me, suddenly diffident. I tried it on. It hung on me, but it was beautiful. It's been so long that I've lived only in blankets and rags. I was overwhelmed, speechless. "Girl, don't you worry about it. It didn't cost nothing. And I'll take you somewhere that you can show it off someday," he promised me solemnly. "You still just a bone," he finally teased me to make me laugh through my tears. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow. We have some comments coming in. I think I'll take a bit of a breath. That was a hard but beautifully rendered and told story. So I do recommend this book very highly. It's a thick book that'll take you through winter, for example, which is around the corner. I read it this summer actually, and it's really, really wonderful. You learn so much, and at the same time, it's very heartfelt as well. Now I'd like to introduce our next reader, Amatoritsero Ede, who's an internationally award-winning poet born in Nigeria. He has 3 poetry collections: A Writer's Pains and Caribbean Blues, published in 1998, Globetrotter and Hitler's Children, which came out in 2009, and the very newly minted Teardrops on the Weser. His debut collection won the prestigious All Africa Akigbo Prize for Literature. The second book was nominated for the Nigerian Literature Prize in 2013. In 2004, he won second prize in the first May Ayim Award, International Black German Literary Prize. His work appears in 14 poetry anthologies, local and international. Ede is an assistant professor of English at Mount Allison University, New Brunswick. He's the publisher and managing editor of Maple Tree Literary Supplement. And I think maybe we'll be able to put his all this information in. Maybe actually I encourage Ama that you put the link to the journal in chat afterwards. So great, great journal, and it's online. So hopefully you'll check it out. So we will now let Ama delight us with poems from his latest collection.
Thank you, Veena. This is the book you saw the cover on the just. So I'll be reading from this, and I'm keep the time. You know, I'm very cognizant of the timing. I just need to explain this point came out of a German writer writing residency at the University of Bremen in 2016, and I was on the River Weser. I was living on a peninsula on that river, and that inspired the poem. And I begin to compare the differences between, you know, the peace of European rivers as compared to the troubles of African rivers, historically speaking. So the first, when you hear Zimmer, 350, that's just a German expression for apartment 350. Okay, so I'm going to start. This is Teardrops on the Weser. From what scattered river basin does the Weser drink? What gravity at the pumps? With taproot in Hannover Schmilden, reined in these stampeding waters, gather them up, level the sky-high fountain, and roll the frothing mass into glass smooth singing bubbles, funneling them forwards towards Bremen and the North Sea, as one spliced big-bodied water, coiled like twist rope, coursing thickly, a solid brown vein snaking through Lower Saxony, only to burst apart into twin tributaries. Two great flows, the undernourished Little Weser and her fatter conjoined twin, finally separated deep down in downtown Bremen. Both parallel waterways mirror their parent streams, the Fulda and the Werra. This river is grounded rain, splattering into a big brown bowl, a silent concert of absent raindrops, drumming, settling into a muddy flood of tears, finally strung together. It is the Weser mermaid, with fishtail lying supine, serpentine hip on sodden river floor, pining for a scaly mamman lover, shedding turbid tears, shimmering, tears squeezing out of nymph eyes, and sculpted as watery fish scales, spreading out evenly on the back of this endless brown whale, twisting, turning, coiling, and uncoiling with the current. Tiny wavelets and eddies, surging and ebbing into hulking bilge and great bulge of water, slushing and rippling, pulling as in the bathtub, forming the Weser's mobile frosted glass liquid face, a river brown translucent mirror across the land, splintering the sun and sending forth a many fractured light, hard and bright as flashing swords, sudden as cascading coins, banked brightly on the waters and scintillating in the sun through foam and soap suds. The crying river limped along sedately, severally dimpled, both channels equidistant from my third floor brick brown apartment block, rising like stiff mohawk hair above the flat dull-eyed riverbed. Unreal estate, postcard painted on the iris, an island in the middle of this river's shiny skull, carved out with a barber's swift, sure hair-parting hand. This oblong strip of property is segmented from the long-jointed fingers of cement and glass tenements called the Tierhof, two opposite rows of apartment buildings leaning into a narrow cut passage, stretched like a dark, painful tear on the cheek of the island between two far-flung street bridges, the Wilhelm Kaisenbrücke to the right, on the left, Bürgermeister Schmidt-Brücke. Both boundaries are a long parallel watery yawn away from each other, and between them, the tear-off footbridge, arched like a bow, quiet sentinels above the flood, the section of these parts of the Weser. So I'm going to, I think I still have some time. I'm just going to move to another part of this long poem. To sort of give it a round it up. All right. So at the end of the day, it's looking at this water over the whole course of a day and the evening when it's a bit dark. So I say, when the day's business is in discounts counts down to a close, and coins are counted and accounted for. At sundown, when darkness descends upon the deep, the gulf deepens between church and I, as night navigates the Weser, and the crowds thin out, disappear into minutes and seconds, till the river bank is zero treasury. So cafes and restaurants on the embankment do not gain more gold, until a straggle of guests and night revelers make noisy return. From big soccer triumphs and club Olympiads, shrill with animal noises, it is alcohol yodeling into the wind. The morning after, the day is hungover, the river dull drunk, from so much liquid, languid, immobile, and dead of current. The Weser's inner engine, broken, life sapped from the water main, soggy from much weeping, already a wretched sop the night before, as the tired river floated, devoid of current, like a dead thing, belly up in the dark, lit only by port lights from docked boats, the Anzeit, Das Schiff, Admiral Nelson, that gay river restaurant rollicking and gay in daylight. This boat decked out by decked-up folks and forks, but at night, when the sky shuts heavy brow upon its lower earthly lid, it is a dark, ghostly hulk and wooden silhouettes made more hoary by shadowy port lights dancing on the greasy oil-like flow. Beautiful nightmare on brackish tides. And then I hope I still have some time. And then I compare the two rivers, or the European and the African river. Just a minute, because now it's German waters. That's the Weser and the river Weser. German waters, not unlike the Niger or Benue, which slaked Sarawiwa's infant thirst. Did Maria Rilke, that master poet with the most girlish of names, ever from the Weser drink? Like another capital poet who pines for the Ethiop, singing his thirst, go water, go river, where eyes that look becomes a brook. The Niger and the Benue, both troubled Nigerian waters, flowed together as one into the Atlantic, like the Fulda and the Vera into the Weser and the Rhine. The Fulda and the Vera, both differently plumbed by time, not roughly charted, but deep in different degrees, and not discovered from far away by a stranger from England called Mungo Park, not waterways to ferry and ship black bodies to a Europe-poisoned new world, that trafficking of black souls in rotten ship holds across the cursed Atlantic. German waters, not unlike stale over-fermented wine, when the swastika goes for a swim, and gulps salt water, mouthing drunken threats. But sober are the draughts that bring in one boatload of immigrant infusion, 1 million faces strong. 1 million strong is the German goodwill that groups hearts together, drives up hate, dams the bile from the right. 1 million strong is the many-splendored love that trump hate as I contemplate this river. At my window, watching the desert wend its way into the horizon, like the letter Z or a lazy rope, I reach out my hand, gently pat the face of water. Go water, go rivering, carry along your deep mystery and memory in their symmetries and asymmetries. Carry along your sluggish, rapid, watery weight. Go water, go rivering, where every eye that looks becomes a thoughtful brook. Thank you. So I'm going to stop there. I think I've about exhausted my time.
Wow, wow, wow. That was astonishing. Lovely. Thank you so much. You're getting a lot of comments if you look in the... So we will say goodbye to Ama for now, but we will get his book and we will move on to the next reader. Also a little in the historical vein. Everyone actually is making these links with history. It seems very important as well. So I'd like to introduce Nilambri Ghai, who was born in India and has a master's degree in English literature. She has over 30 years experience as an educator, writer, and policy analyst. Her career in Canada includes work in the public and not-for-profit sectors in the fields of adult literacy and skills development. Nilambri is also a regular contributor, copy editor, co-editor, and founding member of Montreal-Sarai. Again, Nilambri, if you can put the link to Montreal-Sarai in the chat later, that'll be good. It's a great magazine. Everyone should have a look at it. It's one of the oldest webzines in Canada. She recently published From Joanna to Janaki, Bringing Vikings to Varanasi, about the life of a Danish woman, her grandmother, who left Copenhagen for India in 1895. Parallels are drawn between her journey to the east with Nilambri's journey to the west. Take it away, Nilambri.
Thanks, Veena. A big thank you to Tartan Turban Secret Writings, Gavin, Mayank, and Veena for inviting me to read and for hosting and curating this session. And thanks very much to Bonita and Ama for your great words and your beautiful writing. My book, From Johanna to Janaki, Bringing Vikings to Varanasi, is about identity, languages, oral history, and connections. As a child, I loved to hear my grandmother's story and her journey to India. Everything about her intrigued me. Her pictures and her transformation from Johanna, a Danish woman in formal dresses, to Janki Bai Chopra, an Indian woman in long-sleeved blouses and saris worn traditionally in the Siddha Pallav style, with embroidered ends placed in the front. For almost a lifetime, I kept her letters with me in the hope of writing about the voice behind them. Finally, after many years, I put this book together based on what I had heard and read. I have tried to be as factual as possible and have tried to clearly indicate my assumptions whenever I had questions or relied on speculation. This book is also a search for connections between our two lives, a journey into a disappearing past that I have tried to relive and preserve. I hope that it will be of interest to those who like to recreate periods in history through documents such as letters from those times. I hope that it will be of interest to my family and friends who might even know less than I do about the people who lived during that period. And I hope that it will be of interest to future generations looking for evidence of what it might have been like for a young Danish woman migrating in the 1890s to an India searching for freedom from colonial British administration. It could not have been easy for young Johanna in India. She was in a country bitterly engaged in finding a way toward independence. Many of the people she knew and admired were repelled by the presence of foreign white sahibs who controlled the lives and careers of the darker natives. Johanna was perhaps viewed as a Farangi and a Gori who had ensnared her husband Bolaki Ram Chopra by her Nordic appearance that rewarded her a seemingly huge advantage. What many forgot was that Johanna was not British, even though she was perceived as being British. She was in fact as British as she was French or German. Like other British Mem Sahibs, though, she was white. And there was little appetite at that time for sensitivity to subtle ethnicity. Color was the main and sometimes the only identifier. When Johanna landed in India as Bulaki Ram's new bride, she found to her dismay that he was already married with 2 adult children. It is difficult to comprehend today why Bulaki Ram had concealed this fact from her, and it is even more difficult to understand why she accepted this arrangement. Based on social customs in late 19th century India, early child marriages were very common, and it was not unusual for an Indian man to have more than one wife. I will now read an excerpt from a Danish article published in November 1902 during Johanna and Bulaki Ram's visit to Copenhagen. 8 years ago, she followed the man whom her heart had chosen, a man who belonged to another race and whose country was thousands of miles from her own country. The man was a Hindu advocate and the country was India. As it may be of interest to our readers to hear about the home and way of living of this woman in the Far East, we visited the lady who is for the moment on visit here, and we met her in her childhood home in a cozy, old-fashioned flat in Fulstrad. The fact that Mrs. Chopra has so well integrated in India is probably due to her will and ability to assimilate with the Hindus in as many ways as possible. She quickly learned the language, became a vegetarian, wore all Indian women's clothing, and followed all daily life's details, especially by converting to Hindu beliefs. Therefore, she is also on very good terms with her husband's friends. Their wives, the Hindu women, play such secondary roles that their behavior is of no importance. As a curiosity, we ought to mention that since Mrs. Chopra, before her marriage, had eaten beef, in India the cow is worshipped through the god Krishna, who as a child lived for a long time with cowherds. The women consider her as impure, and none will eat together with her. Yes, some will not even touch her. More on Bulaki Ram, her husband, who was a barrister, sculptor, Sanskrit scholar, writer, publisher, and one of the founding members of one of India's first national bank. I'll read from an excerpt from one of his pamphlets in which he writes amusingly about Mahatma Gandhi, who was also a barrister. So these are Bulaki Ram's words. This pamphlet is the result of a chance conversation with a picturesque old Mahatma. He held the view that there were 3 sins which afflicted mankind: the pursuit of enjoyment, the pursuit of comfort, and the striving for domination over others. This kind of theoretical generalization of sin has, I believe, done incalculable harm to our society. This sort of harm-working fallacy, I feel, has to be exploded. Both Mahatma Gandhi and Tolstoy are quite unsuitable guides in matters relating to sex, except perhaps to others of their own kind. Because in Gandhi's case, he labored under injury done by immature and rather immoderate sex indulgence, and particularly owing to the sex revulsion which followed the unfortunate incident of his having been engaged in enjoying his child wife when his place should have been by the side of his father, who lay dying. Tolstoy's sex attitude was warped by the violently promiscuous excesses that he indulged in his youth. In his case, celibacy was a reaction to profligacy. But these strictures do not imply that we should not acknowledge and venerate the teachings of Gandhi and Tolstoy in many other spheres and the loftiness and nobility of their character and the enormous influence they have both wielded. So Bulaki Ram certainly thought, and he wrote well, but his satirical rhetoric could cut through the heart, and it did. In 1915, Johanna, along with her 4 children, left him for a position offered to her by her friend and mentor Annie Besant at the Theosophical Society Girls' School in Varanasi, which was earlier known as Benares. Johanna describes her final days with Bapuji, as she referred to him in her letters to her children. She writes, "To help him clear off some of his debt, I had lately to sell off a little property left for me in our place at Hafizabad. He says it could all have finished up in a week or so, as he did not want to pay our rent for this house on New Road. I am quite amazed to see a man like Bapuji, who is intellectually very high up, having so little sense of the laws of hygiene that he cannot see that a moist and damp house would, as sure in anything, have brought consumption. Bapuji also speaks about visiting me in Benares. I shall always be glad to show him the hospitality that I can, but if he does not feel the strange relation in all this, why should I mind it? We don't separate because we in any way live a quarreling life together. So far, there are never any words of ill feeling between us. But Bapuji has just lately told me a few cold, cruel words, after which I saw clearly that neither I nor my children must henceforth be such an intolerable burden to him." In the final few chapters of the book, I have tried to connect with Johanna by writing letters, these are imaginary letters, to her from my century to hers. Here's an excerpt. Sorry. This letter, written across centuries, is an attempt to connect with you and to draw parallels between your life and mine. Like you, I left my homeland and made my journey from India to Canada in 1976. My children now are more Canadian than Indian, just like yours had become more Indian than Danish. I think of your letters as capsules of evidence of your life and times. They indicate that you were occupied with many thoughts, the primary one being communication. You wrote and received long weekly letters and expected the postal services to deliver these letters on time. You waited anxiously for them since they were the only reliable source of sharing information. When this system broke down during the Great War, it caused you great anxiety. You changed your name from Johanna to Janki. I am not sure if the change in your name was due to the traditional convention that forces Indian women to adopt a new name at the time of their marriage, giving them an entirely new identity. Perhaps the name Johanna was just too difficult to pronounce. I tried to change my name as well, but I found that shorter versions of Nilambri proved to be even more challenging. Janaki starts with the same letter as Johanna. It has a few of the same consonants, and the sound is not all that different. There might not be much in a name, but to change that which one has grown up with and with which one associates one's entire self must not have been easy for you. That is why, in my letters, I still think of you as Johanna, falling in love with a dark foreigner, foolishly perhaps, leaving everything behind to follow a mere feeling and a hope. In closing, I would like to thank everyone who supported me through the writing, editing, and publishing of this book, and especially to Dolores Chu for introducing me to the wonderful world of oral history and for writing the introduction to this book. Thank you.
Thank you, Nilambri. That was really wonderful. And we have some comments again, including some personal stories are emerging as well. I wish we could just linger and talk to all the authors, and I'm sure we have questions for them, which is another reason to hang out for the after at the after reading party, where maybe we could corner some folks and get some comments, get some questions answered. So now we have a very shorter reading, and before our break, though it has not seemed burdensome to me, at least, the passage of time. I don't know how you feel. Very luckily, Banozan has joined us at the open mic, and she's going to read next. Banozan is an immigrant poet, librettist, translator, teacher, editor, and poetry curator with more than 200 published poems, as well as 3 books. The 2 books published in English in Canada are Songs of Exile, which was shortlisted for the Gerald Lampert Memorial Award by the League of Canadian Poets in 2017, and Letters to My Father was published in 2017 by Piquant Press. She is the founder of Shab-e-Sher Poetry Night, Toronto's most diverse poetry reading open mic series, which commenced in 2012. So the poets among you could lobby her for spot, I'm sure. It is a brave space that bridges the gap between communities of poets from different ethnicities, nationalities, religions or lack thereof, ages, genders, sexual orientations, disabilities, poetic styles, voices, and visions. Wow, I certainly plan to attend one of them. Bano will now present a poem that was very recently published, I believe, on August 15th by Dissident Voice.
Thank you. Thank you, Veena and Gavin, and to the awesome readers so far, phenomenal readings, and I'm sure more is coming. And also thanks to all the audience. A little bit of a background. You all probably know what is happening in Afghanistan. Afghanistan has a border with Iran, the country of my birth. And we share not only a border, we share a language. One of the languages in Afghanistan is Dari, Persian, as we call it in Iran, or Farsi, which is the same language, but has different names and is spoken with slightly different accents. And we also share the misfortune of going through governments or experiencing regimes that are not only far from ideal, but actually are human rights violators. The supreme leader in Iran banned the import of vaccines, COVID vaccines, from US and England, and that has led to the Iran going through the horrific 5th wave of a pandemic in a country of 80 million people. The official death toll is around 600 right now a day. And I recently also lost my father, my mother, so my mother was very much involved in charity and very much a person who cared about women, especially. So given that Afghanistan is going through what it's going through, and the Taliban, the stories that are emerging from Afghanistan are horrific, I urge you not to believe what the Taliban are saying, because the Afghans are saying different things. Anyways, I right now live in Toronto. I am from Babol, Iran. This poem was first published, I wrote it on the, August 12th. The English version was published on August 15th. And by that time, some facts had changed. Kabul had already fallen. And then I translated it into Persian or Dari or Farsi. And it came out in Hafte Weekly, that is in Montreal. So I'm going to read both English and the Persian version. Mother Afghanistan. for the people of Afghanistan, and for my mother, Masume Mazaheri, of Babol, Iran. Mother died, and Afghanistan is falling. Not that mother followed the world anymore. The Alzheimer's washed her clean of conflicts. She could not remember her name or her departed husband's real and imagined transgressions. Mother died, and the death toll of the pandemic rose to 1 person a minute in my land. In Afghanistan, foreign forces withdrew under the cover of night, and the Taliban demanded that young girls be married to their fighters in broad daylight. In Kabul, refugees live on streets, trembling at the no longer unimaginable fall of Kabul. Mother fell, and I wonder if I can still stand. Rise up, mother. Remember who you are. Remember your name. And now the Persian version. مادر افغانستان. مادر مرد و افغانستان در سقوط است. نه اینکه مادر این اواخر پیگیر جهان بود. آلزایمر او را از درگیری ها پاک شسته بود. نام خود را به خاطر نداشت یا خطاهای واقعی و فرضی شوهر از میان رفته‌اش را. مادر مرد و تلفات بیماری همهگیر در سرزمینم به یک فرد در دقیقه رسید. در افغانستان نیروهای خارجی شبانه عقب نشستند و طالبان در روز روشن دختران کمسن را به ازدواج با جنگجویان خود واداشتند. در کابل پناهجویان در خیابانها به خود می‌لرزند از ترس سقوط کابل که دیگر دور از ذهن نیست. مادر سقوط کرد و نمیدانم آیا میتوانم هنوز ایستادگی کنم. برخیز مادر، به یاد آر که هستی، به یاد آر نامت را. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Banu. I'm so happy you could join in. I think it's almost like a moment of silence to everything that has happened and is happening in Afghanistan and Iran and elsewhere also. Thank you again. This is really beautiful. And it was wonderful that you could read in 2 languages. Yeah, we need linguistic diversity big time. Well, I was trying to actually have a French writer, but finally I could only do 6. So this is like, it's been so astonishing that I'm sure you're like, hey, let's skip the break. But you know what? We've announced it and we will take it. So I don't know, Gavin, if you're around, it's 8:06
yes,
by my watch. You are, excellent. So should they come back at 8:15 then?
Yes, that would be perfect.
That'll be great.
Everyone
and
can take a, yeah.
Yeah, and just to let people know, there's still Carolyn Marie Souaid, who'll read both from her novel as well as a poem from her latest collection. Andreas Kessaris, who has nonfiction funny story, or at least the parts I've seen are funny. And I have a story, interestingly, which actually is set in Persia. It starts off there. And then we will, please stay till the end, because we're also going to have a poem from Gavin, who is a poet, a very fine poet. So we let you go now. Is everyone okay? Maybe they can do something, show hand or something. I don't know.
Yep.
Yeah.
You can.
Yeah, people are
turn your
raising
cameras
hands.
on. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. We can also unmute yourselves, and if you want to talk to each other during the break, if you have a question, I'll try to stay here and help moderate, so that because Zoom, Google Meet, not very friendly to talking at the same time.
Excellent. So
Anu, thank you so much.
You can take
That was
a break
amazing.
as well.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Your reading was so moving as well. Like everyone's reading was phenomenal.
But yours
thank
hit
you so
to the
much for
heart.
this.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Really
Thank
beautiful.
you. Thank you.
Please
So-
stay, come back, eat some chocolate or whatever it takes. Somehow chocolate is my trick.
Or there's always wine as well. So I see
Why
that.
not wine and chocolate?
Absolutely, wine and chocolate go well together. I see that Nilu has raised her hand, and Leslie, and I know that Gloria had actually raised her hand even earlier. So why don't we start with Gloria? If Gloria has a question for anyone in particular, you can raise your hand if you'd like to, ask a question. Oh, Leslie's lowered her hand. Hey, Leslie. Another fellow Mwenzi House writer, Leslie Roach. Awesome book, by the way. I finished the sentence. Yes, Gloria, would you like to? Are you still there? You're welcome to unmute yourself and ask a question if you had one. And I believe there was one more, Neelu. So we'll give Gloria a couple of ticks to see if she's around. No? Okay. Then why don't we go to Neelu? Neelu, do you want to unmute yourself and you have a question for any writer in particular? No. But I do see that Ray has unmuted. Ray, do you want to say something? I see that you've unmuted. Nope. All right, friends. There's no pressure to speak, but if you do ask the writers any questions, we'll have about half an hour at the end of the evening. We'll just hang on together and shoot the shit, as the formal phrase goes, over some wine or munchies or whatever you happen to have handy. We have Carolyn coming up, we have Andreas coming up, we have Veena coming up, and then we'll open it up for everyone to talk to each other and ask questions about the words, the writing, the experience. And if nobody's asking any questions, I will turn on some music.
Voila.
Veena, it's amazing. Can you hear me?
Yes.
It's lovely. It's very, very nice.
Thank you. I'm so glad.
Each one is a different, they present different diverse subjects and styles, and it's really, really good.
Wonderful. Thanks. Yeah, I was telling somebody about your book. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, I belong to this group of, it's called Desi Ladies Montreal. So I was especially mentioning, but I'm glad that I think some folks from the South Asian Community Center of Montreal are here who got to hear of it through that link. So,
Will there be a list of the books? I mean, I know that they're advertised at different places, but for us who are online, Veena, can you provide us with a list of where the books are available and everything?
Yeah, I will. I can circulate that, and actually,
that'd be really good because yeah.
And actually, I'll also, I mean, I'll send it around as an email, but maybe I'll put it on Facebook as a follow-up plus the recording. When do you think the recording will be available, Gavin?
So typically what I do is it takes me a bit of time to edit it because I make your individual recordings. I separate instead of just posting the whole evening, I separate each one of your readings and make it possible for each one of you to have your own reading. So it takes a little time, usually before the next reading. So is the time
could we like put up the whole thing as well as a
oh, absolutely, we could. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, we could. We can we'll put it, what I will do is I'll put it up in the Facebook group, and that will allow everyone to view it again. I know that Amma had a friend who was trying to get on, who got on sort of midway through Amma's reading, so he'll be able to listen to all of Amma now. And Bonita, what we have been posting links to the books in the chat.
Yes.
So, but we'll at the end, I'll post all the links all together, as well as we'll post it on Facebook. Like
yeah, that would be good because you have to stay on. Like the chat will go when you log out, and
absolutely,
you know, I think spending all my time going down the chat to find the that would be harder. That'd be good to have it. That'd be wonderful.
I will send you.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, thanks.
So 8:16, what's it looking like? 50, should we start or?
Yes, absolutely.
Start to 54. Introduce Carolyn, maybe. Hey, Carolyn, are you here? I think so.
I'm here.
Excellent.
There she is.
So welcome again to the Tartan Turban Secret Readings, number 31. It's the lucky number, 31. Get your lottery ticket. All right, so I just need to open a document. Our next reader is Carolyn Marie Souaid, who is a Montreal-based author of 9 poetry collections and a novel. Yasmin Haddad Loves Joanna C. Makaitik, which was the silver medalist for Best Regional Fiction Independent Publisher Book Awards 1918. She has performed at festivals and literary events in Canada and abroad, and her work has been shortlisted for numerous poetry awards, including the Pat Lowther Memorial Award and the A.M. Klein Prize for Poetry. Blood is Blood, co-written and performed with Andre Farkas, another Montrealer, garnered a top prize at the 2012 Zebra Poetry Film Festival in Berlin. Her poems and stories have appeared in the Malahat Review, the Literary Review of Canada, and elsewhere, and have been featured on CBC Radio. In her youth, she lived and taught in Arctic, Quebec. And when she reads, you'll see why this is also a point to be made. Carolyn, it'd be good if you put your website in chat, and anybody else, any authors who have a website, do put that in as well, because Carolyn is just so busy with the number of things she does. I do not know when she sleeps or if she sleeps. So she's going to read from her novel as well as from her latest poetry collection, which is called The 11th Hour.
Thanks, Veena. Thank you for inviting me to be part of tonight's reading and for curating. And thanks to Gavin as well and to my fellow writers. I'm going to be reading from Yasmin Haddad Loves Joannesi Mahetic. I promise, Veena, next time I'll pick a title that's easier to pronounce. This novel is the story of a Syrian-Canadian woman in her 20s with a feminist leaning who goes to northern Quebec to teach in a small Inuit community still struggling in the aftermath of colonization. Along the way, she meets and falls in love with Joannesi, an Inuk whose traditional culture is still very much a part of his life. So the prologue, which I'm about to read, takes place in the present and introduces the flashback story. Yasmin moves through the city, trying to forget. The sidewalk is wet and slick. Window displays of skeletons and zombies with eyes spun back in their sockets. A veritable festival of the dead calling to her. The Halloween moon is conspicuously absent. She crosses a dark intersection bordering on a derelict park she normally avoids. Except for a crepe-thin layer of snow on everything, the grass is brown and worn and the trees are bare. At one time, before the pigeons and the homeless moved in, it was a sanctuary of mown grass and manicured hedges, a landmark named for its centerpiece bronze of a famous explorer, John Cabot, scanning the horizon with a map in one hand and the other shading his eyes. As though answering a dare, Yasmin saunters toward the park. She notices some motion at the base of the statue, a shabby man looking small and unstately before the monument's grandeur. Something in his appearance makes him vaguely familiar. His lopsided Montreal Canadiens toque, his unsteadiness, the brown paper bag in his lap. Hanuipit, she calls out. A sharp wind blows the hair backwards off her face as she approaches him. The surprise in his face leaps out at her, the fact that she can speak his language. She feels the burn of his eyes as he drinks out of the brown bag, sizing her up. She's wrong. She's never seen this man before. Where did you learn to speak Inuktitut? I was up north for a while. He takes another slug and looks down at the space beside him. He glances in her general direction, then down again at the same space. She hesitates, but can't find a reason not to join him. The marble steps are cold. They sit together in silence, observing the ebb and flow of the city. Once upon a time, she would have stoked the conversation. She would have asked what community he was from, why he was here, when he was returning to the north. She would have bombarded him with an earful of questions. She would have hardly waited for his answer before moving on to the next. She doesn't do that anymore. She's learned to let things happen in their own time. You look like a smart girl, he finally says. He horks up a mouthful of mucus and spits it across the darkness. Maybe a teacher. She nods, impressed by his guess. Lots of girls go up north to be a teacher and to be in love with an Inuk. He smiles. I had a Halunak teacher once. She was smart. She left before she found a man. He drinks a little more, sniggers, and passes her his bottle. Yasmin shakes her head no. They return to their comfortable silence. The snow picks up, needles them with icy pellets. He pulls the hat down over his ears. A fat, wet flake falls onto her lashes and melts down her cheeks. She sits there quietly. The fact that she can go on this way indefinitely with 1,000 things to say and no real urge to say them amazes her, and doesn't. After a while, he stands and stretches, wobbly on his feet. He scratches his head and furrows his brow, trying very hard to remember something. He looks wistfully into the distance. Tell me everything you know about winter, he says. The second excerpt is a short description of that winter that the stranger is asking her about. By this point in the book, she and Joannesi are seeing each other, but their relationship is still new. He taught her about his culture, warned her about the things outside that could pose a threat to her, a certain kind of snow, the kind you could fall through, snow that was crusty on top but soft inside. He said he would protect her. One Saturday, they left the village before anyone was awake, darkness folding around them. Scarf pulled high over her face, she settled in behind him on the skidoo, thighs gripping his hips. They sped toward a vein of light in the distance, wind loosening wild drifts of snow on the outskirts of town, where a pair of bedded down huskies slept, noses buried in each other's fur. She gave herself over to the purity of space, the rasp of the sled runners carving tracks in the snow, the boundless land and sky, nothing for hundreds of kilometers interrupting the horizon. This is what pure freedom feels like, she thought. This is what it means to let go of everything completely, to think of nothing, to not think, to be all animal, bone, piss, shit, blood, to act only as your body requires, involuntarily. The world was white, the moment was breath, and she was in it, inhaling deeply, exhaling the silence that begets silence, where everything begins again at the beginning, at the hushed epicenter of everything. I'm just going to read a couple of poems from the 11th Hour. This book came out last year with Ecstasis Editions. I finalized it during the beginnings of COVID-19. Augury 1. The world is calling out for the world. In the throat, an endless mountain. Words rising, the shapes unnatural, a bluish bit of hush at the center. See the circling hawk? There is longing here. And this is called The Unsaid, Apology to My Father. I am writing this because you suffered, not from PTSD or because of a handicap or birth defect, club foot or cleft palate. You suffered because I forced you in your crumbling Buick past its expiry date to drop me off a block from school so I could turn my back while you drifted toward the highway ramp with your accordion map, your trunk of bargains, and a blemished banana for emergencies only. I'm writing because your budget motels with their flashing neon and chenille bedspreads embarrassed me. I merited a father who rode the elevator of an exclusive tower, not a traveling salesman in a corduroy jacket with dandruff on the collar. Our Xerox summers at the same old beach, you described your life like a lottery win, while I thought a house with an electric garage door was far too little for a man to strive for. I'm writing out of shame because hindsight tells me I wasn't an afterthought like a forgotten invoice in your shirt pocket. I was important, a vital piece of the human puzzle, the dog-eared snapshot that traveled in your suitcase, your lucky charm, your personal cheering squad, the mother of future branches of your tree. At 12, 14, and into my 20s, I was consummate goodness, not the mean volcano that scalded with its temper. Like cod liver oil, you nauseated me, your average build, the way you dunked the toast in your morning coffee, your music sucked, you were too old, too dumb, never enough. In spite of it all, you persisted with the fiction, folded your newspaper. With a stiff upper lip, you shrugged, you smiled, your ample heart expanded unconditionally. Where you gave love, I gave grief. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Remarkable. Oh my God. You know, poets also write the best prose. So I hope the other poets we've read as well do the writing. And this was just wonderful. Thank you so much, Carolyn.
Thank you, Veena.
We will now move to Andreas. Andreas Kessaris grew up in Montreal's Park Extension District, the son of Greek immigrants, and currently lives in the town of Montreal, Quebec. He graduated from Concordia University with a BA in Communications and English. He's done various jobs, and for the last 14 years, he has worked as events coordinator for Library Paragraph. His column, Read On, with Andreas Kessaris, was a popular feature in the former community paper, The Local Seeker, Herald. His writing has appeared on Sweet101.com, The Right Place, and on Curtains Up TV. The Butcher of Parkex and Other Semi-Truthful Tales is his first book. In September 2014, he was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, a theme he continues to explore through his writing. Go for it, Andreas.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you, Veena. Thank you, Gavin, for inviting me to be a part of this. I am honored to be included among these great writers. As Veena said, I am Andreas Kessaris. My book is The Butcher of Park X, and the story I'm going to read is called Mrs. Lavina. Just want you to know that The Butcher of Park X is a humorous, lighthearted look at growing up in park extensions. I just want to look at myself here. This is so cool, isn't it? Okay.
You are looking good,
I was raised.
Andreas.
I know, but you know, I'm over here in French Polynesia, and I'm just the joke. I was raised in a culture that values strict, uncompromising adherence to the dogma of politeness and etiquette at any cost. Parents and school teachers bombarded us with the rules of proper manners, like never speak unless spoken to, never interrupt an adult, never contradict an adult, never say bad things about an adult no matter how truthful, never disobey an adult, never point out an adult's faults or misbehaviors, never refuse an adult any request, never stop an adult from doing whatever they want to you, etc., as if they were commandments carved in granite by an infallible deity. Your worth as a human being was judged by how well you followed those rules, and if you broke one or even slightly deviated from their path, no one would take your side and you were labeled naughty or impolite and thrust out of regular society, scarring your family with a shame that would last for generations. Long ago, my parents' limits were tested by the most unlikely source. It all began when I was 5 years old and they were preparing for a caller. I paid little attention to our guest, choosing instead to play in our basement with my brother. After she left, my parents excitedly announced that we were soon to be proud owners of a brand new set of encyclopedias. It was costly, especially for our family, but they believed it to be a wise investment. And it was. My brother and I took to the books with an eager curiosity and voracious desire to learn. I recall the day they arrived, hardcover books carefully wrapped in construction paper and packed in individual white cardboard boxes with a pull tab for easy opening. To house them, my parents had acquired an inexpensive but elegant-looking pressed wood bookcase with sliding glass doors and gaudy plastic moldings glued to the top. The set fit perfectly. The exquisitely bound tomes came with a massive 2-volume dictionary and an atlas. But unknown to us at the time, they also came with something else, Mrs. Levine. Mrs. Levine was the person who sold us the set. Mrs. Levine, the person who sold us the set, was a recently widowed retiree who took up the job on a part-time basis to give her a raison d'etre. Destiny brought her into our lives as one of my father's taxi fares. The first time Mrs. Levine showed up unannounced was a few days after we took delivery. She said she came by as a follow-up to see if we liked our purchase and was pleased to notice my brother and me leafing through them. My mother invited her, out of politeness of course, to stay and have a coffee, and that soon turned into dinner. By my bedtime, Mrs. Levine was still there, droning on about some damn thing or another in our living room. I had no idea at what hour she actually left, but I was surprised when she wasn't there the next morning. I fully expected her to still be on the couch, endlessly babbling. It wasn't long before Mrs. Levine popped in for a second time, and for a second time overstayed her welcome. And then again. Back then, my family was the hub of activity in our social group. My parents were like the Zelda and F. Scott Fitzgerald of working-class Park-ex Greeks. Our cousins, uncles, aunts, and other relatives congregated at our place most Fridays and Saturdays, primarily because we were always well-stocked with Molson Brador beer. When Mrs. Levine dropped by unexpectedly, it was surreal watching an elderly, prim and proper, daintily dressed, blonde-haired, blue-eyed Anglesa navigate the crowd, oblivious to her square peg stats. Everyone was scratching their heads as to who this person was and what they were doing there, leaving my parents to stumble through awkward, hasty explanations when she was out of earshot. I did not relish my parents' social lifestyle. In those days, especially when company was over, I would wear a plastic Lone Ranger-like mask and skulk around with my head down, trying to avoid eye contact or any contact for that matter, with our guests and their often annoying children, and try to do my own thing, which usually entailed reading. I did this until my father had enough and angrily ripped the mask off my face and tore it in two right before me and everyone else. Mrs. Levine once saw me with the mask on, crouched in a corner with my nose in the book, just wanting to be left alone, and remarked that I was a little devil, which my mom, who was filled with old world superstitions, saw as a taboo. It was absolutely verboten to speak like that, or it would bring bad luck on the house and evoke the evil one to claim my youthful, innocent soul. But she did not object out loud because it would have been improper to point that out to our company. So I guess in my mom's reality, my possible eternal damnation was less of a priority than offending an interloper. Mrs. Levine started showing up for holidays. During one such visit, she announced that she had just adopted a dog and insisted we come over to her house to see the pooch. My parents, not wanting to be discourteous, accepted the invitation, sternly warning my brother and me to behave properly and not spend all the time with her new pet. Mrs. Levine had a nice middle-class home in Outremont. Her empty nest was clean but way too large for one person, and like her, it had an aura of quiet, sad loneliness. She decorated her abode with photos of her late husband, daughters, and grandchildren, and spoke of how she did not get to see them enough since they had all moved away. She prattled on about her maladies and the trip she took to Cuba, occasionally going so far as to let mom or dad get a word in edgewise. She served coffee, tea, milk, and cookies, and we stayed until it got dark outside. Our exit from there was more like an escape, with Mrs. Levine continually insisting we remain just a little bit longer. We hoped that would be the last time we'd have to see her, but sure enough, she kept finding reasons to pop in even after we moved to Stewart Avenue without telling her. We had updated our encyclopedias, and those jerks probably finked on us. Years went by. Eventually, her dog broke its leg and had to be euthanized. I personally believe it was a suicide. After that, the visits became more frequent. By then, she was no longer selling encyclopedias, and perhaps hanging out with our family was her new career. One gloomy Saturday afternoon, when my father was out working and my brother was at a friend's house, I stayed home with Mom, who was curled up on the sofa in our living room with a serious case of the flu. The sun had just set, and the house had an eerily dark, except for the dull orange glow of our wood-grain Zenith System 3 console television, which as usual was on whether or not there was something worth watching. I always found it odd that I hadn't heard of or seen a System 1 or 2, and whenever I inquired as to what exactly the 3 systems in question were, no one gave me a satisfactory response. The doorbell unexpectedly rang. I answered it. It was Mrs. Levine. "Look at you, Peter. You have grown up so much. You're becoming a young man," she said. I'm Andreas." "Of course you are," she said. She came upstairs and went straight to my ailing mother. "My, I didn't know you had a hide-a-bed. Isn't that nice? Someone could stay over." I'll never forget what happened next. My mother, who tried in vain to teach me all the proper tenets of socially acceptable behavior and how they must be obeyed, no matter how ridiculous, inane, self-defeating, or inconvenient. My mother, who put her cold, hard, heartless, rubber-soled slipper to my backside with determination whenever I committed even a minor faux pas, which I seemed to do just about every time I interacted with another human being. My mother, who would die of embarrassment whenever my father recounted one of his many thoughtless, crude, vulgar anecdotes. She gathered whatever strength influenza could not expunge from her weakened body and said, "Please, Mrs. Levine, I can't today. Please leave, Mrs. Levine," in a sad whimper not unlike that of a scolded canine. Mrs. Levine stood stunned for a moment. Then she continued, "That fold-out bed must be useful when you have guests they can sleep over. Please, I'm sick. I just can't do these today. Please leave now. I can't. I just can't." My mother broke in with a combination of anger, desperation, and frustration that I had never seen her use before on someone who wasn't a family member. Mrs. Levine didn't say another word. She just calmly turned around and left. Not long ago, Mom moved into a senior's residence. There wasn't enough room in her new apartment for everything, so the obsolete encyclopedias, along with many other furniture items and wall hangings, had to go. My childhood was loaded into a recycling bin that day. With the exception of the glass doors, the old bookcase had held up despite its poor quality. We left it on the curb, empty for anyone who wanted to claim it. It disappeared within minutes. All that remains of the original set are the dictionaries and the atlas. They sit now on my overcrowded bookshelf like the ruins of a once magnificent temple. And Mrs. Levine? We never saw or heard from her again. Among my big family, she became a forbidden subject. Her name was never again to be uttered, lest she reappear. Occasionally, I'd wonder if we were the only family she targeted, and if so, why did she choose us? Was she angry or hurt by what had happened? Did she ever think about us again? Did she miss us? Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Such a great little story there. So last and likely the least is another author, a little inevitably, but no, this is Gavin after me. So I think I've already been introduced, but maybe Gavin's going to do something. Are you Gavin? Should I go now? I'm a bit confused.
Sorry, Veena. I was muted.
Should I go now?
Yes, please go. I was just going to screen your book covers so that everyone could see your book covers.
Excellent. Yes, my beautiful book covers need to be seen. Ta-da.
There you go. Yes. And I will also share links to Veena's books and all the ways you can follow Veena, which are many, online as soon as she finishes reading, so I don't interrupt her with annoying notifications. All right, Veena, over to you.
All right.
And I will speak about you again at the end.
Oh, thank you. So one of the miracles of modern technology is that I'm actually reading off a page, but apparently you can see me. Though I don't know what kind of image, but anyhow. So this story is called The Travels of Sanbusak, and it's from my collection I'm still writing actually, and it's called Annapurna's Bounty, Indian Food Legends Retold and Recipes. Son, Sambusak! Lale's shrill voice reached him again. Sanbusak shook his head, trying to dispel the sound of his mother's voice. He was sitting by a little stream, a makeshift fishing line dangling from his hand. Rain was infrequent on that dry plateau, yet the heavens had opened up, creating this quicksilver run of water, the afternoon sun glinting off it. It was almost a miracle. "Sam!" The call was closer, sharper. He lifted his line out of the water, sighing. If he left now, he would get away with a cuff on his ear. If he tarried, it could be a thrashing. "Alan Miam, I'm coming," he yelled. He started running, loose-limbed, towards the hut, flipping his line this way and that, pretending it was a whip, keeping in check the fine horse that he was riding. On the way, he passed the goat herder's goats, scattered here and there, though the goat herder himself was nowhere in sight. He envied the goat herder, who was only a couple of years older than him. He got to stay out all day with not a care in the world. Lali stood with her hands on her hips, cowling. "Where's the firewood?" she said. "Firewood?" "Yes, firewood." Her voice rose. Sand remained silent. "So, you forgot." "I was fishing." "Fishing? So where are the fish? Show me." "I almost caught one. I was close, very close." "Liar." Just then Ehsan called out to them. He was a few feet away, dragging a load of sticks tied together with a piece of rope. With one leg a bit shorter than the other, he could still move at a good pace. Lale rushed forward to help. Sanbusak sat down on a stone, trailing the fishing line in the dust, picturing a sandy-haired dog like the one the goat herder had at the other end. Lale and Ehsan brought the load up and leaned it against the wall of the hut. His elder brother was covered in sweat, smiling. Maybe you'd ask Ehsan to get the firewood," said Sam. Lale strode over and slapped him. "Maman, let it be. Let's eat," said Ehsan. "Tomorrow we eat fish," Sam declared, rubbing his cheek. Maman can really deliver a good one, he thought. Lale woke early the next morning. After her usual chores, she filled a large basket with barberries that grew wild in a thicket not far from the house and walked to the market. It was late afternoon by the time she had sold the berries. Now she made her way to the fortune teller at the far end of the market. The old man had spread a rug under a persimmon tree. A canary perched on his shoulder. He sat smoking his pipe, his customers having slowed to a trickle. Lale sat down next to his box of colored cards and they exchanged greetings. "I'm not of quiet mind," she said. The man, looking sympathetic, waited. Lale took her time. "It's my younger son," she said softly. "Ah, I have seen him. A lively one. He's good for nothing. He's a child. He's not so young. He's fatherless and should know his responsibilities." The man said nothing. "Please draw me a card," she said. The man held out his hand and whistled at the canary, who hopped down on it. He brought it to the edge of the box of cards, and the bird drew one with its beak. The man read the card and said, smiling, "He's going to be a great man and travel far." "Really?" "The cards never lie." "A great man, how?" "That's not clear. The boy is different. He'll find his own path. How will it all end? Will he have money? Will he be happy? Healthy? Shall I pull another card?" Lale nodded. When the fortune teller read the new card, a shadow passed over his face. "What is it?" Lale whispered. "It's the verse about immortality," said the fortune teller, collecting himself. "What?" "San will have eternal life." "No! Is he a jinn? Oh God, what is all this?" Lale cried out. "Calm down, please. You misunderstand. It means that his fame, his name will never die. He will die, of course. He must. He's mortal." The fortune teller, still uneasy, kept his expression neutral. Acting was a necessary skill in his profession. Lale looked astonished. He continued, "Let the boy grow as he will. I know you've only 2 children. It was so very tragic, your husband's death from that fall. Naturally, you worry. But San has a bright future. Lale's eyes filled with tears. Mamnoon, thank you, she said, clasping the old man's hand. Go in peace, sister. May you step lightly. May your cares fall away. Lale dropped a couple of coins in the dust and left. 2 years passed. San, still scatterbrained and irresponsible, turned 13. Lale tried her best to knock sense into him. She even got Ehsan, the reluctant one, to give San a light beating from time to time. And yet she was less anxious now, more hopeful. The fortune teller's words keeping her company. Then, a message came from her cousin who lived in the outskirts of faraway Neshabur. He needed a helping hand, a dependable one, on his large farm. Sanbusak volunteered to go at once. This, surely, was the chance he was waiting for. His enthusiasm was infectious and finally convinced the skeptical Lale. Ehsan thought it was a good idea from the start. The day before his departure, Ehsan got him the traditional good luck charm from the fortune teller. It was a glass bead with concentric circles going from dark blue to light and then white, representing an eye. The pendant hung on a thin leather string and would keep San safe. Ehsan had paid the fortune teller extra to say a special prayer and make the charm foolproof. While Ehsan was away, Lale slaughtered a chick. She chopped up the tender meat, then cooked it with onion, mashed chickpeas, and herbs. Squatting by the clay cooking stove, she mixed wheat flour with water, rolling out the dough into thick rounds. Then she cut each circle into 2 equal pieces. She fashioned them into triangles and stuffed them with the meat mixture. Then deep fried them in hot oil. Tears flowed as she worked. Stop it, Mama, and don't cry, said San. His excitement was tinged with sadness. Is the smoke from the fire, silly? Said Lale, wiping away the tears. You're going to be a big man one day. I know. The next day, she held him for a long time before she let him go. So this is Sanbusak, and he's obviously starting on a long journey. And you might say, kind of interesting. But you know what? You all know Sanbusak. This is the thing. Each and every one of you has encountered Sanbusak, because Sanbusak is no other than samosa. Have you ever eaten a samosa? I think everyone's muted. So this, I have personified samosa, Sanbusak. It did originate in Iran and it made its way to India and elsewhere. And so the story is kind of the adventures of Sanbusak / samosa. Thank you.
That's awesome. Awesome, Veena. You reading something more?
Pardon?
Are you reading something more, or you're reading?
No, I think that was 10 minutes. I have discovered that one reads 100 words a minute. Maybe I went a bit fast, but it's been a long journey for everyone. So I will leave you with hopefully some appetizing tales will emerge from this manuscript. So
you're certainly making us hungry. Okay. Well, I guess in that case, it is time for me to actually take the mic and say a couple of things. I promised I would actually say something about Veena, and this is actually the moment in which I say thank you, Veena, because this has been an outstanding evening. My email sign off as people who write to me by email. I thank you in several languages, in Ojibwe, in Urdu, Hindi, and in French, of course, English. So, Chimigwet, thank you. This has been an amazing evening to all the writers who read tonight. and brought us their talent. You were just so special. This has been just such an awesome evening. Don't drop off the call just now, because you have a chance to talk to everyone if you'd like to stay on. After I'm going to do a very brief reading, and then we have a chance to have a conversation. When we host this in our offices, which is what we do when we do this in real life, IRL, we actually have samosas, believe it or not. Provided to all who attend, and some wine, which certainly lubricates the conversation, and a civilized way to talk about literature and to ask questions of the writers, and to get a photograph and get a book signed. We can't do the book signing stuff and buy the books directly from writers, but you can certainly still buy the books online, and the links have been posted throughout the evening on the chat, and we'll post them on Facebook in the Facebook group again. In case anyone wanted to know, by the way, why we call it the Tartan Turban Secret Readings, very briefly, Barrett and Welsh, the company I founded, is the logo is a tartan turban, because we specialize in multicultural communications. We try to create inclusion through communications, and that's the world we live in. And for me, as a poet, who is a writer commercially as well as in poetry, it made perfect sense to try to find a way to put the office space to use after hours. But when we went online and we had to invest in platforms like Zoom and Google Meet and so on, it made sense to put those to use during the pandemic. And as a result, we've been blessed with writers across the country. And we've had writers who are Canadian who have participated from all kinds of places, including outside of Canada, signing in from places as far away as Puerto Rico, for example. And we've been blessed with that. So once again, I want to say thank you to all of you. I usually also tell you what the next reading is all about. So our next reading is going to be, that's Tartan Turban Secret Readings 32. It's going to be curated by Mariam Pirbhai. Mariam is also an academic. She is a writer. She's got a collection of short stories out, and she's going to be featuring Farzana Doctor, Amy Sands Brodoff, Lamis El Atari, and Mariam herself. Of course, I believe Frances Roberts Riley, who is writing from the Welsh Romani perspective, is also going to be reading. So really fascinating writing to watch out for. That's going to be October 28th, Thursday, October 28th. And with that, all my final housekeeping is done. And because when I have you actually in my office, I have you trapped, and I can force you to listen to me. With the online readings, I realize people can drop off. So I encourage you, brace yourself, grab a glass of wine or scotch, which is my favorite poison. I will read you two poems. One is somewhat serious, but because I didn't want to leave you after the entertainment of Andreas and Veena, I didn't want to leave you on a low note. I've got something lighter as well. So I'm going to read two short poems. The first poem is called Konkan, which Veena will recognize the word. The Konkan coast is the coast in which Mumbai is situated. It is also the coast which faces the fiercest monsoons you could possibly imagine. This particular monsoon that we're living through right now, my family still lives there. It's particularly bad. So this first poem is called Konkan. The rain is no god of mercy for the Kohli fishmonger, her sari tucked between her legs, her palm frits in her basket flashing silver praise for the downpour while she fears for her husband. The shore is jet and foam, the black-skinned basalt swollen, people breaking the tide of monsoon funerals, the church bells tolling, death and death and dying, the litany of disease. Light the candles, cloak names and smoke in lace veil incense. Jaundice, encephalitis, malaria, waves. At the spray's edge I stare, at the storms my father sails for me. But soot-tanned boys know little of death. Just friends at whose funerals they served, swinging the censer, lighting the air with bells. And that's the first poem. And my second poem is a fun poem. I have to confess that I owe something of this to Banu Zan, but Banu, in the absence of her of the series because of the pandemic, staging it in real life, took online with a poetry workshop that so it was a Shabby Shared poetry workshop, and a lot of these poems are written to Shabby Shared poetry workshop prompts. And this next one certainly is one of those. The title is playful. Dessert Ex Machina is the name of the poem, and it goes: blueberries are eyes. They cry when we crush them. Do we become more Canadian when we add maple syrup? My eyes have bags. I sleep very little. And in winter here, where the fruit I eat comes from other places, a plane remove away, I waken jet-lagged daily. The gods send a machine to fix me, tube-clad air, mango soap washed care, and comedy that mangles bed and hair and pillow talk. I want to love but loll, grin but grunt. Still, my eyes now rest at night, and sleep is sweet again in bluest, blackest night. And that's Dessert Ex Machina, a fun poem inspired by blueberries. And with that, I invite you to unmute yourselves and stay for the after party, such as it is, and speak to each other, talk to the authors, the amazing, amazing authors. Thank you, authors. And don't forget, buy their books, give them 5-star reviews and Goodreads. Unmute, and Veena, don't forget to unmute. Okay,
Yes.
nice. Well,
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much.
I was
I wish
trying
we
to
could
be
have heard our
subtle.
laughter when we were muted.
Thank you. Thank you,